Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Phoebe Scott. I'm a senior curator and curator of research publications at National Gallery Singapore, and I want to welcome you for joining us. Before I introduce today's launch, I want to say a few words about the October Gathering, the overarching event that brings us here today. October Gathering is a major program charting burgeoning issues in the field of Southeast Asian art. Acknowledging the critical challenges issued by artists, cultural workers, thinkers, and dreamers of all kinds, October Gathering will bring these minds together as they investigate what it truly means to display art in a museum in modern times, further defining and advancing the gallery's decolonial aims. So, in keeping with the spirit of October Gathering, today's panel marks the publication of the very first book in National Gallery Singapore's new art writing imprint. And here it is. So this imprint is an expansion of National Gallery Singapore's research publishing efforts, and its aspiration is to celebrate the diverse voices and genres of writing that create the discourse of art in Southeast Asia, both historically and in the present. And really the impulse behind this imprint is to acknowledge the fact that there's such a rich body of writing about art from this region that doesn't fit the confines of a conventional understanding of art history or even an academic art history. So in this imprint, we hope to celebrate that by including artist writings, art criticism, experimental approaches to the image, and a kind of more open and expansive discussion about responding to art and responding to the image. So I can think of no better book to express the aspirations of the new imprint and to reflect the vibrant, genre-defying and exciting writing taking place in the art of this region than the book we're launching here today. Araya Rasdjarmrearnsook's I Am an Artist, He Said, is a compelling mixture of anecdote, art criticism, and thoughts on the creative process and pedagogy. The artist's narrative voice also plays with the conventions of gendered language in the original Thai in a witty and provocative way. So National Gallery Singapore is really honoured to be publishing the first English language translation of the book, and we're also very honoured to have Araya with us here today. And I'd also like to thank our other special guests, and I feel very bad that I'm blocking you from seeing them right now, but they'll have their own moment on the stage very soon. But Roger Nelson, co-editor of the book and its very enthusiastic champion, as well as Heman Chong and Amanda Lee Ko, who have agreed to lend us their talents by performing some reading from the book this afternoon. So before I hand over to Roger, who'll give some further context and introduction to the book and introduce our speakers in more detail, I'd like to say a few thank yous regarding the development of the book. So firstly to Araya herself for trusting us with the publication of this book and for being here in person to launch it. I'd also like to thank Kong Rithdee for his lively translation of the book and thoughtful and nuanced accompanying essay about the translation. Co-editors Roger Nelson and Chanon Kenji Praepipatmongkol for their passion, attention to detail, and critical acuity. They also have a wonderful accompanying essay in the book, which is really a critical reading, I feel. Thanks also to two very supportive anonymous peer reviewers for the book. So this is also our first efforts in generating a wholly peer-reviewed imprint at National Gallery Singapore as well. And to Professor Annika Furman and Professor May Adado Ingawanij for giving endorsement quotes for the book. Finally, a big thank you also to the book's tireless project editor, Joyce Chung, assisted at the final stages by Charmaine Un, and to our very patient book designers, Charlie Allen and Melvin Tan from Currency. And if you like what you hear during this reading, you can also buy the book at the table immediately outside the City Hall chamber. So I'd now like to hand over to Roger Nelson, who many of you may know was, until recently, our curatorial colleague here at National Gallery Singapore. Roger is now Assistant Professor of Art History in the School of Humanities at Nanyang Technological University here in Singapore, where he teaches and researches in modern and contemporary art of Southeast Asia. So, hand over to you, Roger.
Thank you so much, Phoebe, for that kind introduction, and thank you all for being here. It's really nice to see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces as well. So thank you all for coming. So as Phoebe said, I'm going to talk to you about the book. I'm going to talk to you for about 10 minutes, and then I'll introduce the other speakers that we're all really waiting for. So I'd like to thank all of the people who made this event and this book possible, and I'm going to be repeating some of the names that Phoebe mentioned because I think it's really important to acknowledge their labour. It's invaluable labour, but it's also often invisible labour. So thank you very much again to Joyce Chung, to Charmaine Un, to Lynette Loire, to Erica Lai, to Wong Jiamin, to Melissa Wong, and to many others. Thank you. Before I begin, I'd also like to say that my remarks today introducing the book really draw on all that I've learned over the past 2+ years of working closely with Araya Rasdjarmrearnsook, as well as with the book's translator, Kong Rithdee, and with my fellow co-editor, Chanon, Kenji, Praepipatmongkol. Kong, who is an award-winning translator and one of Thailand's most celebrated cultural critics in his own right, is unable to be here today, and Kenji as well, who's a Knight historian, a curator, and also an occasional translator, is also sending his regrets and his regards. But despite their absence, both Kong and Kenji are present in informing whatever insights I may be able to offer into this really quite confoundingly confusing, really quite brilliantly bothersome, and as Phoebe has already said, rather genre-defying and universe-expanding book. Before I begin, I'd also like to stress just how privileged Kenji and I have been to have worked with Araya and Kong. Araya is best known internationally, and I'm guessing probably known to all of you as a contemporary artist. But in Thailand, she is perhaps equally well known, and certainly equally prolific, as a writer in the Thai language. Araya has been shortlisted for the prestigious SEA Write Award in 2018, and Kong Ritdhee's translation of Weerapong Nitiprapa's novel won the SEA Write Award in 2015. Both Araya and Kong are truly formidable figures, both in the literary worlds and in the art worlds. And indeed, one of the things that this book makes clear is just how intertwined the practices of art making and writing are. So let's turn to the book. I hope, it's no understatement to say that this book will change the way we write about art in Southeast Asia. This book gives us a new vocabulary, it gives us a new grammar, it gives us a new appreciation for the intelligence of artworks as things to think with, and also for the intelligence of readers, you, as being capable of thinking for yourselves. I also think that it's only a small understatement to say that this book often makes no sense. It really is quite a lot of fun. I've dreamed of having this book translated for about a decade now, and there are many scholars and friends who have told me about it, having read it in the original Thai, and there's too many names for me to thank now, but I'd like to particularly mention May Adadon Ngawanich, Annika Foreman, Tanavi Chotpradit, and several others who are listed in the book's acknowledgements. So let me begin again by quoting another book, the catalogue for the Thai Pavilion at the 2005 Venice Biennale. And I think what we will see with these excerpts is just how much has changed and just how far we've come. In that book, Araya said, "Because desperate longing cannot find solution in other forms, art is the only way out to it." In the same catalogue, the co-curators of the exhibition wrote, "Few Thai women make a living as an artist, and the number is becoming fewer when it comes to those with an international reputation. Certainly, Araya Rasdjarmrearnsook's work features feminine elements, but her reputation comes purely from the quality of her work, not merely because she is one of the few Thai female artists." Now, the book we are launching today was first published in Thai in the same year, 2005, the year that Araya exhibited in the Venice Biennale. And its Thai title was Pum Pen Silapin. The book was an edited collection of columns that were originally published over the preceding years in a mass circulation newspaper magazine called Matichon Sudsapada. In this book, again published the same year as that catalogue from the Venice Biennale, Araya takes a rather different approach to discussing issues relating to gender in artistic practice. The book is written as a dialogue between two narrators. One uses the masculine pronoun pum, which we render in English as he or he said. The other uses the feminine pronoun dichan, which we render in English as she or she said. Both narrators, the male, the female, the masculine, the feminine, are Araya. In the book's first chapter, Araya writes, "To me, the cultural condition relating to the use of the masculine pronoun pum is more enabling than the use of dichan, the feminine pronoun, in many respects. I'm also curious to know in the end," by which she means in the end of this book, "if the two selves are so dissimilar that they have to split up, or if they can be unified, the unification between the real gender that expresses its real attitude in writing and the pronoun used to show the self in varying degrees of shallowness." Fast forward from this excerpt of the first chapter to the book's final chapter, Araya writes, "Whenever he, pum, takes charge, he invades real life and dominates she, a skinny, long-haired figure who likes to walk her dogs in the mornings and evenings. Sometimes her two hands have 3 dogs on 3 leashes, climbing a winding path along the edge of a forest next to a reservoir. The 4 of them traipse up a hill draped in the smothering aroma of earth and grass in the rainy season. The one human among the 4 is often heard mumbling, pum wa, or I think, what? Pum pen silapin, or I am an artist, he said. Ah, I get it. Then she nods. Sometimes she smiles contentedly. The dogs often think she's talking to them and turn to look. Later they understand that she's merely improvising a story in order to put food on the table of their unusual family that's so full of love. When our writing mission ends, we, he, and she will return she to normalcy. Just look at her, how pathetic she has become." So we've heard from the first chapter and the last chapter, but in between, the book's 29 chapters, within the book's 29 chapters, we meet a dazzling cast of characters, including artists, curators, scholars, students, dogs, and the artist-writer's own endless alter egos. The book, and I can't stress this enough, the book truly defies categorization. At times, it's a rollicking travelogue, a first-hand account of contemporary artists from Southeast Asia being catapulted into the newly international or global circuits of contemporary art in the West. At times, the book is a pedagogical tool for the teaching of art history, exploring artists from both Thai and Western canons. At times, it's nothing more than salacious, delicious gossip. And at times, it's almost incomprehensible. Always, it's incredible that the book's translator, Kong Rithdee, has rendered this so delicately and discerningly into English. So I'd like to quote from Kong's translator's note, which he generously wrote for us to accompany Araya's text in the book. Kong writes, "It may seem far-fetched to say that Araya's text is untranslatable, since you're holding this book in your hands. But as I swam out into her vast ocean of letters, I realized that it would be disingenuous not to admit the limitations of what one can do with a text as rich, deep, blithe, and incandescent as this one. A text that oscillates unpredictably between lyrical poeticism and philosophical pondering, between articulate self-reflection and cheeky unintelligibility. A text that will make you brood and chuckle, nudged along by joy and bewilderment. A text that conjures up a perfect storm of tender reveries, generous nostalgia, art history, abstract musings, wacky quirks, canine gags, moving odes to friends and colleagues, epic descriptions of artworks, made-up terms, lots of them, songs, poems, jibes, jokes, travel journals, autobiographical anecdotes, gossip about living artists and imaginary tete-a-tetes with dead ones. And then, without so much as a wink, sudden, impulsive, thrilling digressions that at once stretch the contour of the narrative and test its resilience." So with this description in mind, I'd like to remind you that this book was first published as newspaper columns in a mass circulation newspaper. When I first wrote to Araya about my plan to have this book translated and published in English, she replied simply, "I no longer talk about that book." I knew that she was lying. I'd heard her speak about the book insightfully in a lecture on that it was organised by the Sculpture Centre in New York in 2014. But I also knew that she likes to speak rather indirectly. In the years since then, Araya has been so boundlessly generous with teaching me through this book and through our conversations and correspondences. And indeed, one of the recurring and the most important ideas in the book is about the importance of teaching. For Araya, unlike for many of her male peers, teaching is just as important and indeed perhaps more noble than what she calls art making. For her, to teach and to write and to make art are trans-sustaining, mutually enriching practices. She says that the only place left to talk about art is in the art class. And I wanted to say that this book is ripe to be talked about not only in an art class and not only by students or scholars of art history or of Southeast Asia's contemporary art, but also by those interested in subjects as diverse as feminist theory, autofiction, experimental public pedagogies, and much more. And so it's for this reason that today we've invited one artist and also one writer to share with us their responses to the book in the form of their readings from it. Araya also says, "The reader is all grown up, so I shouldn't worry." So with that, I will end my remarks and introduce our next speaker. We are very lucky and very honoured to have with us today Amanda Lee Koh, a writer who I'm sure needs no introduction, especially after her fantastic keynote last weekend, also as part of the October gathering. Amanda is a writer, but she's also an editor and a translator and more. And it's this kind of multi-hyphenated aspect of her practice that I think makes her particularly well suited as a reader of, and perhaps I can also say a victim of, Araya's book. Amanda's own books, which include The Ministry of Moral Panic and Delayed Rays of a Star, are both popularly and critically acclaimed internationally, with the latter having been both a Straits Times bestseller and one of NPR's Books of the Year, among many other accolades. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Amanda. Over to you.
Thank you, Roger, for that kind introduction. And I am so honored, Araya, to be, one of the voices of this book. And I think what's really interesting is that over the course of lunch, I think Heman and I have totally different approaches to this material, which I think also speaks to, the layeredness of the text. So I'm really excited. And I'm also glad that, over the course of lunch, so because there's the he said and she said, my original thinking, surprisingly binary, was that I would read the she saids and then Heman would read the he saids, but then Heman was like, that's not gonna work, right? So I'm glad to now be, presenting, it's a thick book. It's a thick book. And I took about a week to read it. And I guess I came back with a pretty discursive narrative that I found for myself within Araya's complexities. And so it kind of jumps in time and space within the book. So I will make a note of the page number that I'm reading from. You know what, I'm gonna turn a bit sideways because I feel like I want to share this feels good. Wait, Heman, you sit here. Huh? No, sit.
I sit here, you block the mic.
Yeah, no, go there. Yes, okay, this feels good. Okay. Okay, yeah, is it okay for you guys? You don't mind my side view? Okay, can. Okay, so this is, I guess, in a way, my own response to the emotions stirred in me via reading this book. So, 96, Chapter 7, Love Your Rules. She said, Preamble, it is art. She could turn the cold into gray, pushing the fog down until it brushed the water and submerged. It is art. She could patch together pieces of ragged memories, adding weight and color, until she could hear the giggle from her childhood that made her cry. Turning around and rousing the hurt from sleep, challenging it once again. This time triumphantly, closing in firmly with each step, joyful in the fictional triumph. It is art. She could turn the sea blood red, spin the constellations around, roil a bed of sand and fill the sky with its grains, rouse the night into a joyous dance. Don't forget to add a nocturnal fragrance, which quivers like a young girl snickering, yearning for the touch of a man. Turning a limping dog into a graceful steed, transforming its scab-covered hide into a beautiful cloak, putting a spell on its cracked, crude bones, and turning them into a flower-festooned carriage. Appointing a ring of fireflies as royal guards, easing the path of the king, even just for a fleeting moment, in the imagination. It is art. Forget reality. Resist modesty. Follow art meekly with chest puffed, butt raised, and start crawling on all fours. No, don't bark, and don't yawn. It is art. Though the intention and the goal do not rest their heads on reality, trample virtue beneath your feet and dig your toes firmly on the ground, and don't slip into hell. It's burning down there. Feed it some change. It is art. Taste its full flavor, but only for a transient moment. The money spent, we can look for funding later. Page 35. Chapter 2. Oh, actually 3. An artist's insecurity. She said, preamble, I miss being in a field of morning glory at dawn, with a small path snaking through it. I miss blades of tender grass woven like a raft, welcoming the soft pink petals of 3 lotus flowers ruffled by a gust of wind. I miss yellow bamboo leaves falling on the surface of a pond behind the hill, a rendezvous spot between silence and someone. I miss the billowing waist-high grass field before a wall of looming mountains, black clouds gathering in the distance. I miss the old print works that recorded the sentiments of a girl. I miss them because as time passes, sweetness and sentimentality vanish. What's left is an old woman who, despite her desperate longing for the old days, can't utter a word about it or risks looking pitiful. He said, the memory of art making is so alluring, like the memory of a small, mysterious island in a vast ocean that is unreachable because it is already long gone. The desire to paint something has already been satisfied. The euphoria, the confusion, the indecision, everything felt while working has all become the past, leaving only the finished paintings, just these unmoving objects, some yellowed by fungi, some whitened by dust. The feelings that were once felt are now glimpsed through that curtain of dust. It's like meeting an old flame. You can't remember how you could fall or stumble in love with such a person. But the piece you're working on at the moment excites you. It refuses to leave you alone and causes you anxiety constantly, like waves rolling onto a shore. Page 188. Chapter 14. Art, Save Space. Over the course of human evolution, art has manifested itself as an emergency bell that sounds a warning about certain threats and shifts in culture and society. Art is like an exit or even a victory, a liberation from the domination of the opposing force. Art is a result of a situation that skillfully investigates that very situation. Art is a principal symbol of a safe space that's free from all dangers. And all of this is possible if art exists outside the conditions of life. Wolfgang Welsch. He said, many contemporary artworks fit the definition above. critiques of the current obsession with Thai uniqueness, reflections of middle-class woes, expressions of aggressive insanity, and boisterous mockeries of urban masculinity, critiques of consumerism and suggestions for a way out, attempts to expose the dark underbelly of the ruling class, efforts to undermine the sacred stature of the bureaucracy and academia. These are the themes in Thai artworks that fit the definition above. Most of them are by male artists. Strangely, women artists find it more difficult to be associated with those topics. Male artists exercise the right to art as a safe space for rebellion more than women artists do. Is that because male artists exist outside of the conditions of life? Or is it because women artists exist under these conditions more or less? There is no prize for answering this, she said, interrupting. Male artists say, narrate, shout, and vehemently criticize. They strip naked and suck their own toes, put on a shada headdress and dance, dress up in pink and hold glasses while dancing, play the role of oracular politicians, pretend to kill chickens, strip naked and run around, then pee in a gallery. But all of these activities are like what naughty little boys do to act out in kindergarten and when playing in this neighborhood soy. But when these same activities are put in the context of art, and made to confront reality, these little boys seem to grow up all of a sudden. And this confirms what Wolfgang Welsch said about art as a safe space, and art as a stage on which artists perform roles that exist outside the conditions of normal life, overlapping with the role they have played since their birth until old age. The role of being men, or well, maybe not yet old men, since they still have the stamina to shout, crow, and act belligerently. Grandma's rocking chair, the teddy bear given to me by mother, your breast, my abdomen, a cute little baby, embroidered cloths, a selection of colorful flowers. These two are prescribed by the conditions of life from the time we are children until we become mothers and grandmothers. A commercial advertising sanitary pads with side protectors when we become women, Pampers and talcum powder to wipe the butts of our babies when we're married, supplementary tablets to prevent porous bones when we enter menopause, and still we go swimming merrily with our aging husbands because we have already bought life insurance and earmarked the payout to go to our children and grandchildren. Secure and untroubled by our monthly natural disaster, unmoved by old age knocking at the door. But no, when women artists work with these topics, it is not usually thought that they are turning art into a safe space. That's because Grandma's rocking chair and the teddy bear are domestic subjects derived from personal relationships, and so they are not challenging anything. They do not criticize imported luxury goods that are crushing the country's trade deficit. No, neither the Pampers nor the teddy bear, neither OB pads nor anti-aging lotion can represent the demand for social welfare for postmenopausal citizens. And when the content of the art made by women artists does not flirt with danger, it does not confirm the status of art as a safe space. Page 398, chapter 29, Time to Say Goodbye. She said, "The ending is near. A rapturous feeling has crept over and compels me to compare the feeling of writing this last chapter with the feeling of reading the last chapter of a favorite book with which I have spent a long time. The extraordinary taste of the text, the meaning hidden in the crevices of life. Which one of the two, writing the last chapter or reading the last chapter, gives me a greater sense of lingering hesitation? Do the different roles I play, as writer and reader, bring about different kinds of farewells? What drives my emotions? What leaves an imprint in my mind and my thoughts? What are the benefits I've derived? Is the lingering hesitation compatible with the benefits? The end and the opportunity for a beginning, should they merge into one? My mind is taking flight, drifting and scattering in all directions, just as forcefully as time is encroaching. No one can decide when a story ends, except the writer. I am an artist, he said, should end for just one reason. Because the book is about something that can never end. I've settled on writing it, and now the book has to have a final chapter. But this doesn't mean that all the things that have happened while I've been writing must end with it. Some of these things have just begun, and some things will persist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's my very great pleasure and privilege to introduce Heman Chong. Heman, as I'm sure you all know, is an artist based in Singapore and working internationally. More than this, though, his cultural work is situated at the intersection between image, performance, situations, and writing. And it's because of this intersectional quality to his practice, and also because of his past engagements with Araya's writing in translation, that Heman is so very well suited as a reader of, and again I will say a victim of, Araya's book. Heman's work has been collected by museums internationally, including the National Museum of Art Osaka, the Rockbund Art Museum, M+ Museum, and the Singapore Art Museum. He has exhibited widely at prominent platforms, including the Venice Biennale, the Sydney Biennale, the Guangzhou Biennale, and Natasha down the road. Heman, thank you so much for joining us here. Over to you.
I'm also doing the same thing. Dear Araya, I am writing to you because I have chosen to read your new book backwards, from the last page with the word end to the first, and to select small passages which resonate with how I feel and think about things around and between us. Out of this confusing way of reading your book, I find myself sinking deeper and deeper into your thoughts, like in a dream. Dear Araya, you have always been a big inspiration to me, and I have stated many times publicly that the way I work would not have been possible without the influence of your life and your work. Dear Araya, let me begin. They wrote, end, colonphone, index, acknowledgements. They wrote, we humbly thank Araya Rasdjarmrearnsook for her bottomless generosity and inspiration in conversations and correspondence over years, and for allowing this book to come into being. They wrote, but this book is not about Araya, or not only. This book is about what it is to be an artist, a question which remains irreconcilably split between what is possible for he and what is possible for she, and what lies between and beyond these binary confines. They wrote, Araya wants to die. Of course, not always. Sometimes she wants to live. She writes of rare and precious nourishments that help this woman artist get by. And sometimes she only wants to make art and to write. If the process of art making is a metaphor for dying, it is very beautiful. She wrote, I wept and sobbed, tears choking my eyes when I was digging a grave for my dog. Then I sat watching the cold, stiff corpse in the sunlight, and I cried, my body bent over. The thought of the soft and round body I once cuddled brought endless tears. She wrote, the ending is near. A rapturous feeling has crept over and compels me to compare the feeling of writing this last chapter with the feeling of reading the last chapter of a favorite book with which I have spent a long time, the extraordinary taste of the text, the meaning hidden in the crevices of life. She wrote, I don't know what the best way to go back to the past is, tiptoeing backward, relishing the thought of yesterday, then the day before, then the day before yesterday, further and further back, while today, the present, cradles us. The thought of the past is like a pencil line that's gradually fading as it travels back in time until it goes too far back to be felt. Or, because recalling the past is a mental exercise. Can we pick whatever point we want to go back to? Most of the time, it's the present that dictates our thoughts of the past. She wrote, Project 304 by Gritia Gawiwong sent me an email about an upcoming lecture by the Singaporean artist Charles Lim. Two things caught my attention. Charles Lim's work was concerned with the type of media that had been taken up seriously by several Thai educational institutions. Secondly, he had just taken part in Documenta 11. Motivated by these facts, I went to Charles Lim's talk at the Chiang Mai University Arts Center. The crowd was larger than usual because at the same time, there was also a brainstorming forum on the Mekong region art and culture project being attended by a number of curators and artists from the region. The young artists begin by talking about being a part of a new generation of Singaporeans born to a life of tools and convenience. The government once charged a small fee for the use of computerized communications, but they kept going down until these tools were virtually free and all citizens could keep themselves up to date with all the current events. The artist and his friends realized that there was no longer any frontiers. To them, the world had no distance. Then, one day, an ocean liner accidentally ripped the underground cable that linked up the communication signal, and the whole of Singapore was disrupted. Life was drastically changed, and people were discombobulated. What they used to get instantly by pressing a button suddenly required a long wait. What used to run smoothly became bumpy and delayed. This was something that they had never experienced before, since they first sat down in front of a computer. When the obstacle blew over, the artist and his friends discussed what had happened and realized that this idea of a communication without frontiers was still conditioned by distance, the idea of physical distance that they hadn't previously perceived in the internet age because they thought of the internet as an airy matter. She wrote, I arrived at Braunschweig University of Art, where I had been a student 12 years ago. It was late autumn. In 2 months, the second academic term would end. Being away for over a decade meant my new task as class observer was challenging, so I decided not to propose any specific topic beforehand and spent a week letting my intuition respond to and interact with the environment. Then, a question popped into my head as I took a walk in the cold air and fine drizzle and appreciated the great distance between the town and that native country of mine called Thailand, which despite a place that embraces global diversity, still plays up the quality of Thainess, resulting in images of Westerners being taught to do the Thai smile, Thai wat, Thai dance, a ritualistic resurrection of ghosts of the past to live a new cycle of life, something on which my German friend commented, had the German government done the same, they would have been mauled by the press. People would have accused them of resurrecting the ghosts of the Nazis. She wrote, as an art maker, I am often struck by apprehension and insecurity, which have lately come from such terms as trends, dependence, safety, adventurous, new versus old, Thai versus Farang, unsaleable versus selling, like tat nam tat, I don't know what tam tam tat is, and breaking sales target after sales target. Faced with such insecurity, I strain to think of any of my past experiences that make me immune and push me to make art without abandoning anything midway, making me immune just like those kids in Loe are. Well, in that case, my mother died when I was little. Then my sister, who had come from the same womb, died. Then my lovely stepsister from my new mother died when she was 3. I left home and was parted from the siblings I had grown up with. Can these bitter chips on my shoulder make me immune to outside threats? Or are they ordinary experiences that a lot of people also have? Dear Araya, the end.
Thank you so much, Heman. Thank you. And now it's the moment that we've all been waiting for, and it's with immense gratitude and humble respect that I introduce the artist and writer, professor and Ajahn, dog lover and inspiration, Araya Rasdjarmrearnsook. This is her first trip outside of Thailand since the pandemic, and I'd really like to thank you, Araya, for coming on this journey and for all your generosity. Araya, I'm sure, needs no introduction to anyone here. She's an internationally acclaimed contemporary artist. She began exhibiting her artworks in Thailand in 1979, going on to win several national prizes during the 1980s for her somber printmaking. During the 1990s, she began working in sculpture, installation, and moving images. Her artworks, across media, have consistently engaged with death, desire, and the relationships between image and text, and between humans and non-human animals. She has held more than 25 solo exhibitions in prestigious museums and galleries internationally, and has participated in dozens of important group exhibitions in more than 20 countries, including the Venice Biennale, Documenta, the Asia Pacific Triennial, and again, Natasha down the road. Araya's writing, and I want to stress this again, has been just as prolific, and although hitherto little known in the Anglosphere, it is as a writer that Araya is perhaps best known within Thailand, where she lives and works. She is also professor at Chiang Mai University. Now, I told you earlier that Araya said she no longer talks about this book, which, after all, was first published in Thai some 17 years ago. But I also told you that I knew that she was lying. Today, Araya will perform for the first time for us a brand new text she has written especially for this occasion, reflecting on this book from the perspective of this moment. And it's accompanied as well by a video which is being shown for the first time. Araya, I can't thank you enough. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Araya Rasdjarmrearnsook to the platform.
Sawadika, ขอบคุณที่มาที่นี่ Thank you for being here now. This is my first trip that I come abroad, not because of art installation, but because of one book based on an inability to stay still of someone who sit behind me now. So, thank you, Roger. Thank you, Kenji and Kong Rithdee for reawakening this book that had been lying in a deep sleep through times and circumstance. My presentation has 3 parts: my reading and projected images and text. The images and text should be playful and offer comparison to the reading. So please give me video. Words and meaning when I was a child, when my language skills were still unlimited. I recall vaguely that I perceived the relationship between words and meanings with more clarity than after I grew up into an adult. School, mother, sweets, friends, the sea, monkeys. Because back then, language was filtered through the hearing and innocence of a young person, a pure lucid perception, unsullied by any form of doubt, neither by default nor resentment, neither by the weight of fact or by prejudice. Perception devoid of doubt is special. It's a purity that would later be taken away from us by the experience of growing up and by collective existence, a complex and sometimes shallow collective existence. In hindsight, ผมเป็นศิลปิน was written far away from doubt and caution, in a constant pressure of the weekly deadline. 18 years separate me from the day that circumstances under which I wrote the book. The step I took towards maturity led my perception away from that ability to look at things and parts as those things and parts really were. When the writer reads, it's like she is tracing back the line and seeing the permanence and mutability of being. How did the meaning of water shift from the challenge of swimming in a large pond during the primary school summer break to the tiny amount of water in a little silver bowl that a granddaughter was pouring onto the stiff and pale hand of her grandmother at her funeral? How could we read a writing done while a child was playfully swimming when we have realized that there are other hidden meanings in the mention of water, meaning that are totally different? In the novel, Non-Appearance, a realization came to me unexpectedly as I was improvising the text. It is a scene in which the spirit of a daughter in the shape an elderly woman who called herself an artist was wandering and came upon the spirit of her mother, a teacher who had died at a young age. She taught embroidery and flower arrangement at a women's craft college over 60 years ago. She was on a green grassy hill in the melancholic twilight in front of a giant tree. She was busily sewing the thick and thin leaves strewn on the ground, decorating them with petals, cobwebs, and tree sap, weaving them into a long and billowing thread that flew up like a skyscraping arch, hooking the night clouds and touching the star, then quivering and cheerfully teasing the moonlight. The spirit of the daughter stole a glimpse of the woman's face and knew that she was the same woman in the black and white photograph, the woman from her memory who was harassed by illnesses, the woman who carried the burden of female royalty, wifehood, and motherhood until her life was drained out of her. After she died at the age 29, Mother came to say goodbye in her daughter's dream. She stood still in a room, in the house with its window shutter. Mother's short hair was ruffled by the breeze. If descriptive prose brings a realization, how can an object reinforce that realization with the same intensity? A scene in the novel describes a silver urn containing Mother's ash in the same room that she was standing in the dream. The urn sat on the table by the window. It didn't just contain her bones, but it represented her. From the perspective of someone with a bond to it, that urn has shed its difference. It is unlike Duchamp's urinals or Boy's Dead Rabbit, unlike those Plankish artworks. Through the careful names and place, in personal story, Dog's Star, the fragrance of flowers in Thai literature, the small repetitive things surrounding the character, did not leave and confront anything else outside. They stay and nourishes the writer so she could remain of her cause, just like the urn, nourishing the child by telling her that her mother is still here, on the table, by the window. The spirit of the daughter was astonished by the power of her mother, who was on a stage lit by a soft light, which expanded to the cover sky and the mountains. Such scenes seemed to reaffirm the stage on which the daughter, as an artist, has never had a chance to stand, has never had a chance to hold that position of free commitment. In the peer-reviewed article, there's a phrase, feminine negativity. In the novel, the daughter left the hill in confusion. She had reached the limits of suffering, accumulate through the story of her mother and become her own story. Her suffering results in a suicide which coincides both with the day that 6 months old crippled dog she had adopted passed away, and Constitution Day, a popular occasion among conflicting factions in the nation of Thailand. Then her spirit wandered on. How writing takes a writer to a place where she never imagined. Embracer of story and truth of imagination never doubt the manipulation of their story until it's too far to turn back. The thread of memory is so intimate and treasure that it becomes art and literature. It festers inside the owner of that memory. In the chapter titled Dreams, traditions and progressivism are put on either side of a bridge. People on the traditional side are panicked by the unnameable whatever of the progressive work on the other side where they have never crossed. But Mother Spirit did cross it in another novel. Story of woman under the restrictive Thai culture of the past turned the writer of Phom Pen Silapin into a corner dog. It spins around and grows. Feminine negativity gave birth to Phom, the masculine I, a grumpy but good humor hero who is the burden of my status as a victim, the Chan, turning it into the pronoun Phom. He led the writer, the daughter of a woman, who shouldered the illusory role assigned by heavy reality to step out the boundary that once restricted women of the past. That mother got up to do her craft work amidst the extravagant surroundings made the poem, in retrospect, feel less important. To the lens of the novel that I have mentioned, this book did not produce any touching moment worth mentioning. The book reflected the situation in the Thai art scene during the period of its publication. Maybe because the words from the novel I have mentioned are directed inward, while Phom Pen Silapin is directed outward. Even though Phom still admires the sky, still gazes at the star, and still cries out of pity for the pigs. Let me compare the book with a video work that I was making while writing down this conversation. The video is called Ban Wang Ma, Dog's Palatial House. The book was born out of the instability and insecurity of an art maker. Meanwhile, Ban Wang Ma was born out of an attempt to live happily in the narrow and flat definition of a daily life. If the book shakes the foundation of the thinking that I am an artist, the video challenges the sentence spoken by the German professor in the chapter Art Culture in a Faraway Land, when he said art students must not be naive. The comical new video may make up for the bad karma of the old thinking that I knew enough and could write what I knew. The students in my art criticism class commented that this new video is a bunch of nonsense. I would say they use their naivety intelligently. In the chapter titled Life in Nature, Nature in Art, the granddaughter looks at her grandma, who realized that last night's storm has felled 3 large durian trees. The grandma's calm acceptance of the loss is viewed by the granddaughter with the question, is it because we are human? The storm in the book stirs a reaction between the garden cleaning activity and the thoughts about the storm that caused the mess, like a solemn priest deep in the concentration, so much different from the path and things used by progressiveness. Can be this kind of deep in concentration within the role for artists. In the book, the storm was formed after the death of a rat, and later cleansed the spirit of the rat, burying it deep into the ground, preventing it from being reborn as a rat, not again, until it becomes nothing. In the video, a dog called Feng Shui discovers a magic stick from a crematorium and hopes to use it as an amulet to protect it from being bullied by other dogs. If a rat is buried by the storm and prevented from being reborn as a rat, if a magic stick can prevent conflict, so to prevent prejudice in reading and interpreting, we may want to put a magic stick between our teeth while reading ผมเป็นศิลปิน as a storm is raging outside to melt away the overwhelming existence of someone. In the themes, in the never-ending series of joys that connect our experience in the inability to process something easily, can we ponder the pale skin of Kandavas floating in the water and listening to poetry, but ignore the word rights? Can we do that? Why not? Because the Kandavas are being captivated by the poem. Do not disturb them with our arrogance. And we may want to put the magic stick that Feng Shui found in the crematorium between our teeth while living and existing to prevent ourselves from prejudice and convictions in the midst of ambivalence and disorientation, in the midst of instability and loneliness of life. Both the book and the video emerge from the times and circumstance of a place, each connecting to other places that exist in their own context, times, and environment, just like us. ผม used to go to school before going to the beach, but at a separate occasion from my dog, because our social life used to be separate. It still is now. The sea, when I was young, had a stronger scent than when I grew up, because back then we still could not see the garbage that we threw into it. Mother never told me that dogs could live in a castle until I saw the news that the queen who had just died had left behind 2 dogs. The cremation urn does not understand the dead rabbit in the arms of avant-gardism because it focuses on staying loyal to its role. The uriner ignores the reticle of an over 200 years old poem. the same poem that female corpse cannot ignore. The urinal already has its own personal sound. People are shouting one after another. The bridge to the past has collapsed. Ancestral music plays a brassy overture struggling to embrace a ceremonial tradition. A monkey living by the sea once stole a bag of snacks on top of a fridge belonging to a German tourist who was not afraid of Thai mosquitoes. As the dog enjoys hunting, books and art competes on persuading humanity. When color drips from a palette, let us find a way to escape paper. Shallow haze ruffle existence that morphs into contemporary envy, mixing in and contaminating every atom of ourselves in the stare of the beast and the jungle. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for a wonderful series of readings from the book. Heman, Amanda, thank you for lending your voice to the book today. And Araya, a very special thank you for that new text and wonderfully lyrical video to come with it. And thank you again for entrusting us with your book. And Roger, thank you for your passion and enthusiasm again with this project. Yes, and I think very apt that Araya said, a person who cannot stand still has so much energy and meticulous energy too. So we won't be having a formal Q&A with the speakers today, but if you would like to talk to our speakers, we'll be around, and the books are also available for purchase outside. I understand that Ajahn Araya has very kindly agreed to do a special form of signing, so that's also something to consider if you want to purchase the book today. In fact, the next book in our series will be coming out early next year. It's by renowned art historian and curator Patrick Flores, who's also incognito in the audience. But this is also a wonderful book, a collection of essays that are close readings and experimental readings of the image. It's called Philippine Figurine Image Ornament Art. So please do look out for that next year. And yes, thank you so much for being here, and join me again in thanking our wonderful speakers for the launch today.